I want to introduce you to a man who has worked with this for decades and now is on fire for transforming our culture from a culture in politics of separation to a culture of integration and, I believe, circularity. Maury Giles is the new, relatively new, chief executive at Braver Angels. And Braver Angels is probably the most positive and optimistic and effective alliance of American citizens who are determined to shift our political system from one of division and orchestrated fear, anger, and hate to one of collaborative, courageous problem solving. And to do this year, in the year of the 250th anniversary of this nation, he has an objective. Now, at Circle America, our objective is not to grow our own big organization to take a niche that others are taking, but to empower the other organizations that are doing this already. And one of the groups that will help us to reach our goal of 250,000 supporters across the country, and particularly in those communities that are purple, or where there are competitive primaries, and we want to make sure that problem solvers win, an alliance that helps to build and grow Braver Angels is a very important part of that. So I want to welcome Maury, who is an expert in this, who did this in the private sector and now has this extraordinary opportunity. And please give a warm welcome to Maury Giles. All right.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be able to be here, and I've known Bill for a while in many different walks of life, and in this new change I made about 8 months ago, changing from a 30-plus year private sector career to jump into running Braver Angels, has been a fascinating experience for me jumping forward. Braver Angels, you may or may not have heard of Braver Angels, but we're the largest national volunteer organization that is helping people work to build together with people who see the world differently from themselves. Something that actually I would say is quite a counterculture move in our current society and our current environment and the way we look at the world. And what I want to be able to do today is to be able to talk with you about the role that we can be able to play in ourselves, in our individual lives, to own our part of the American system, the great American experiment, and do it through the lens of a circular economy that you've been talking about for the last few days. Now, at Braver Angels, our work, in my opinion, is in one of the hardest parts of the country today, because we're helping people across the political divide sit together, talk, not to agree, but to build. And to build together to be able to solve things. An interesting and ironic note that that's actually, as I was mentioning, a counterculture play in our society today. So when I think about circular economy, and when I talk about it here today, I'm going to do it from inside that work that we do and spend the next 10, 15 minutes talking about it from the perspective of how do we apply what you've been doing and talking about the last couple of days to the way we work and build the republic, the great American experiment in which we live. Now, I've heard Bill say many times, and I'll quote him again, that policy can't succeed without trust. Civic infrastructure is as essential as material infrastructure, and I think that's exactly right. In fact, I think that it tells us where the circular economy and culture project has to go next and what it needs from us. Now, yeah, I want to drop back a little bit in history in talking about this. In the summer of September, really, of 1787, Benjamin Franklin walked out of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The summer had been brutal. Months of closed-door arguments. Outside, the country was watching and nervous, but a country much smaller than we experience today. And they had just fought a war to escape one system of government, and they had no idea if what they were building was going to survive. And so a woman, her name is Elizabeth Powell, stopped him on the street. And you might remember the question that he was asked. by Elizabeth. He said, well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? To which Benjamin Franklin responded quite simply, a republic if you can keep it. And he wasn't celebrating, he was sharing what I would say in the context of what we've been talking about here, a maintenance schedule, or a necessary reality for the survival of a newly formed democratic republic. Those who built the republic weren't dreamers, they were historians. In fact, James Madison had immersed himself in the histories of Greece and Rome, studying every republic that had ever tried to govern itself, and every way that each one had failed. He referenced, and they knew, that Athens had dissolved into tribalism and civil war, and Rome held for 500 years on a mixed constitution until Caesar crossed the Rubicon. What Madison understood, what the framers understood, is that the problem was never disagreement and different points of view. In fact, the problem was always what you do with it, how you manage it, how you channel that disagreement. He wrote in Federalist number 10 that the causes of faction that we talk about many times today, of party and partisan, they're sown in the nature of men. You can't eliminate them. He went on and said something that sounds almost too elegant to be true. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire, an ailment without which it instantly expires. You can't kill political parties without killing freedom. So the framers built something much more ambitious than a system that erases conflict. They built a system that metabolizes it. Checks and balances, separation of powers, federalism. Why? Because he knew and wrote, again, when he was trying to sell the Constitution to this growing republic, this nascent country, that ambition must be made to counteract ambition. In the language of this room, I believe we would see that as a closed loop, a designed feedback system. Political energy through opposition, grievance, and ambition as an input, not as a waste product. The framers built the original circular political economy, and then they handed it to us. You know, there's one part in the Declaration of Independence that's at the center of this in terms of what's our role in this circular political economy that we can choose to own and build, or choose to break down and focus on individual self. And it's that last phrase in the Declaration of Independence, that promise of the pursuit of happiness. We misunderstand its meaning and where it came from. We typically frame that today as meaning that I can pursue anything I want, anything that makes me happy. But if you go back and see what they studied and what they were drawing upon, the pursuit of happiness was not about feeling good, it was about being good. That was the expectation. That was the key ingredient necessary to be able to have a government that is self-governed, requiring the most important office in that role, in that system of being the citizen. Not the way it's weaponized in the current immigration debate, but in the notion that we're part of this system, that we own it, we're at the center of it. But do we live that way? Going back to Franklin, he said, if you can keep it, it's an active verb. It requires maintenance, deposits, not just withdrawals. And the republic was designed to be renewable, but only if we, the people, treat it that way. But what have we done instead? I think we've built a linear, or we've allowed to be built and act like we have nothing to do with it, a linear political economy. You know the model, which just talked about: take, make, and throw away. Extract raw materials, convert them into products, discard what's left. It works until it doesn't. Until the inputs run out and the waste accumulates past the system's ability to absorb it. Well, look at what we've done to civic life and tell me you don't recognize that pattern. That same exact pattern of extracting first attention and emotional energy through outrage, through fear, through the relentless message that the other side is evil and that every election is an existential crisis, that if I don't win, my tribe doesn't win, it's all over, every single cycle. Then we convert that into political products, fundraising, tribal identity, domination, the currency of the industrial outrage complex. And then finally, we discard what doesn't serve the extraction model. the relationships that are strained, the family and neighbors who become enemies, the shared identity eroded, the civic soil becomes thinner with every election cycle. Now, nobody designed this to destroy the republic. They designed this to win the next election. The destruction is a byproduct that nobody is paying for, and many of us are acting as if we have no control over it. But the framers designed for circular conflict, disagreement that produces decisions, that produces legitimacy, that sustains building our future together. What we've allowed to dominate is linear conflict, disagreement that produces contempt, that produces withdrawal, that produces a system that can no longer metabolize its own waste. Now, contempt is not a natural state. Contempt, like waste, is a human invention. And here is what makes this moment different from what you might expect. Americans already know this. Our partners at Dignity US just released the first annual Dignity Barometer, a national survey asking Americans about this concept and about their experience over our civic climate. The data are striking. A couple of things that I'll point out. 5 in 6 Americans are concerned about polarization, and nearly 3 in 4 say they are exhausted over division. Exhausted over division. Think of yourself. Not angry, not energized, but exhausted. Although I think you might talk to many and they'd say they are angry. But the exhaustion carries over all. And that word matters because exhaustion is what people feel when they want out of a system, when they're ready for something different. But the most important finding in this research is what they call the dignity gap. 94% of Americans believe that every person deserves to be treated with dignity. But only 31% believe and see that we treat each other that way. That gap between what we believe and how we behave is the most precise diagnosis of the problem that I've ever seen in a single number. We are not a country that's lost its values. We're a country that's lost the habits that make those values real. It's not a values crisis, it's a practice crisis. Now, another finding, the last one on this I think that's interesting, is that among Americans who do regularly engage with someone that's different than them, 78% believe our divisions can be healed. But if you're someone that doesn't do that, it drops down to below 60%. Engagement works not because it erases disagreement, but because it restores the belief that something better is possible. What we've been talking about through this effort that Bill and team have put together in Circle America. The feedback loop is still there, waiting to be activated. That's the loop we broke, and that's the loop we can close. Now, one other quick story. In 1889, there's a woman named Jane Addams. Anyone know her story? It's an interesting one. She opened a house in one of Chicago's most fractured neighborhoods, Hull House. Her mission was to add social function to political democracy. She didn't form a party or a faction. She didn't fight on behalf of a tribe. She built a place where people across lines of class, language, and origin could encounter each other and discover that they needed each other. Within 30 years, 500 versions of Hull House existed across the country. Many of these things, a little over 100 years ago, came about in response to a similar time in our history when self-interest and tribalism was dominant in our society. Hers was a fragile experiment, but it became a durable institution. The regenerative capacity was there, and it was waiting to be activated. And that's one of many precedents. We've done this many times in this country before. So what does the circular political economy look like in practice? I would call it a renewable republic that we can choose to design and build and live on our own. First, we eliminate waste by design, not by suppressing conflict, but by creating pathways for conflict to become productive. Collaborative workshops, structured dialogue, deliberative forums, these aren't therapy, they're design interventions the civic infrastructure that allows difference to circulate as a resource rather than accumulate as waste. Second, we circulate civic energy at its highest value. The extraction economy takes genuine political passion and downcycles it into tribalism. The renewable republic keeps that energy circulating at that level it was meant for: actual problem solving, actual governance, self-government. Citizens as producers building together, not as raw material. And third, we regenerate, not just restore. The goal is not some golden age to return to. The goal is a civic culture that gets stronger through conflict rather than weaker. One that treats difference not as a threat to be defeated, but as the raw material democracy was always meant to run on. Madison didn't design a system for people who had been persuaded to agree. He built a system for people who disagreed and chose to remain in productive relationship anyway. That choice is the renewable republic. And it has to be remade by each of us in every generation. At Braver Angels, we call it courageous citizenship, intentionally engaging across difference to build together. Now, one last thing going back to Franklin. Before he walked out that door in Philadelphia, he made one other observation worth remembering. I'm guessing that many of you might remember this or have studied it or seen it. He'd spent the entire summer staring at the chair that George Washington sat in. And by all accounts, George Washington didn't say a lot, but his presence was pretty significant. And apparently so was the chair in which he sat. It had an emblem on the back, half a sun carved in wood. All summer he couldn't tell, is that a rising or a setting sun? But Franklin said at the end of this exercise, now at length, he said, I have the happiness to know it is a rising sun. 250 years later, we are still being asked the same question about the same sun. The Republic won't fail because the design was wrong. It is stressed today because the maintenance has lapsed. Because we have been consuming the civic capital that our predecessors deposited without making the deposits of our own and blaming it on others rather than owning our part. The circular economy asks, what if nothing of value is wasted? The renewable republic asks the same thing of us. About what we do with disagreement, the difference, the friction. What if that is not the problem? What if it is the nutrient that the system was designed to run on in the first place? History won't ask whether we won arguments. It will ask whether we kept the republic. Now, I want to be specific because I'm not asking you to be optimistic. I'm asking you to act. First, start with yourself. The dignity barometer tells us that 94% of us believe that dignity is important in how we treat each other, but only 31% of us perceive that is actually practiced. Close that gap in your own life. Find the one person who sees the world different from you today, tomorrow, next week. Not to convince them, but to understand them. Sit with that discomfort. Stay curious past the point when it gets hard, then build together. That's how the renewable republic gets refueled. It's a deposit, one exchange at a time, in millions of living rooms across this country. Second, build the infrastructure. At Braver Angels, we envision an America where courageous citizenship is the honored norm. We're trying to work with you, with each of us, to change culture in that way. Braver Angels needs people who will do this work at scale, not as individuals, but as leaders. And yeah, there's a QR code that you can get on there right now to say, I'm going to join and be a part of this. It's a volunteer organization. We need volunteers, workshop facilitators, chapter builders, people willing to bring this practice to their own organizations, to their towns, to their networks. So if you're someone who builds things, if that's why you're in this room today, we want you. Come find us. Our community of 80,000 growing needs you. Now, third, The reality of this is also the need to invest in it. Civic infrastructure does not build itself. Every workshop we run, every conversation we facilitate, every young leader we train in the discipline of collaborative action, that requires resources. I spend much of my time finding those with resources and means who want to put this in place to make a difference. If you are such a person or know someone, we need your help. The circular economy of a renewal republic needs capital to scale. So finally, be citizens, not spectators. Be builders, not consumers of chaos. And be the generation that starts making deposits again. The republic, I would say, is renewable, but only when we keep it. Thank you very much.
And I wonder, Maury, if I can ask you just one question about, we have a political, economic, media system that profits from the outrage that you're talking about, that profits from the division. The media wants to divide us, if you will. And when I say the media wants to, it's really the media's business model. People in the media are trapped in it as much as we are, maybe more so. The media system wants to divide people into these two giant tents, and they like an audience that is not particularly thinking critically at the time that the advertisements run. And so this is a very good profit model for the media industry, and it's a very profitable model for the political industry. And by political industry, I don't just mean special interests, because special interests have become a source of extraction for a political industry that thrives by keeping these battles going, managing them forever. So climate is not an issue that we ever resolve, because the political industry makes a lot of money by ensuring that things keep going. Nobody's choosing it. Well, a few people are choosing it, but for the most part, it is just the way those industries have evolved. You're representing bringing people together. How is Braver Angels seeking to disrupt that business model and make it something that is profitable to appeal to that broad base?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill, because I spent years of my early career as a journalist. Then I worked on political campaigns. Then I went to corporate America in marketing, research, and strategy, and building companies and consulting companies. And it is an industry that's pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. And I believe that, as you pointed out, the media side and the political parties, they actually are pretty happy with us staying about 51-49. Mm-hmm. The moment that changes, their model disappears. What we're trying to say is, and we've looked at this so many different ways. A lot of people come at us and say, "Oh, this is just about being kind. You're just asking people to be nice, hold hands, kumbaya." Mm-hmm. Actually, we're not. We're not asking anyone to be kind, although strongly recommend it, because when you're kind, life is a lot better. But that's not what we're saying at all. We're saying that you need to have courage to see the person across from you as a human being, mm-hmm. and to fight against the outrage cycle that the conflict entrepreneurs are making money off of. And I believe strongly, Bill, that the only way that this changes, mm-hmm. is us individually recognizing that we have 100% control over the thing that matters most. Yeah. And that is my choice to act instead of react. The moment we take that agency and hand it to somebody else and say, "I can't do anything about this," that big system of the government, those people who have in Congress, they're all idiots. Well, you voted them in office. Now, maybe you didn't vote for that particular person, but your community, your people did. And this system we have allows us to be able to participate and drive change. So we're trying to inspire, mm-hmm. the recognition of that individual agency, and then equip people to actually practice it and own it. And that's not about being nice. That goes back to Aristotle's notion of the golden mean, mm-hmm. where if I were to ask you what's the opposite side, right? Right smack dab in the middle is courage, right? That's where he said that golden mean is courage, and that's what matters most. And so we're trying to do it. We believe that you've got to reach people individually, and then at the hyper-local level, help them to be able to engage in building together locally. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of an answer on that.
It does. And one of the things that we are taking on at Circle America, one of the things that we've experimented with over the past 3 or 4 electoral cycles, and Maury's former company, HeartMind Strategies, was really a helpful part of this, is identifying those voters and consumers who have the most power in their individual votes. And for voters, that tends to mean voters, a very small number of voters. Our national elections are decided consistently by less than 100,000 voters. Out of how many million voted last time? Jesus, it was 140 million people voted, I believe. 140 million people voted, virtually split down the middle, but about 100,000 voters. And this is not just the last cycle. This is for the past, 16 years or so. About 100,000 voters in a few very predictable states and districts and communities were the ones who chose the president, and were the ones who chose who leads Congress. So those are the vital voters that we need to gather together. And then there are vital consumers who are highly influential in the marketplace. Most of them are women, most of them are moms, who set the trends that lead to brands to thrive. And if we can be kind to the brands that are doing the right thing and reward them with the kind of reputation that makes them current and popular among the moms who spend $7 trillion a year in this economy, and if we can recruit in those particular regions that 100,000 people, and we're going to have to recruit about 1 million, I think, to make sure that we've got the right 100,000, then we can turn the power around. Right now, the political industry thrives because we are divided in half. And what that means is that they get to manage the $4.5 trillion federal budget and divide things up and auction off pieces of it, either as favors or as cash or whatever. That's the business model of politics. It's not the so-called vested interests that we imagine, so much as it's the ones that extract money from the vested interests in order to protect them from the radical forces that they themselves have created that divide us. And the antidote to that is people. And we will either advance a higher level democracy through this process, or we will lose this republic that Benjamin Franklin asked us to guard. That's what we have coming. And this is why Braver Angels is such a valuable partner in this, because they are fundamentally a group that has, in a very positive way, brought people together, and we want to make this a community that enriches Braver Angels so that the Braver Angels can enrich all of us. Now, Doozy, I believe we are going to do a little exercise now to gather some ideas from those of you who are, still here. Thank you for continuing to join us. We're going to be meeting monthly by Zoom, but we'd love to get some of your ideas of how to move forward. So I'm going to ask Doozy to walk us through this, and then we're going to have a final conversation with Xiye Bastida, and I think you'll enjoy that conversation as much as you've enjoyed any of the conversations we've had today. So, Doozy, do you want to walk us through?
Yeah, thank you all for still being here. It looks like maybe travel plans have influenced the remainders of us. But anyway, we envisioned a conversation and exercise in which we might answer the questions that Bill has been asking all day, which are what's most important for advancing circular policies and how do we get there, what's most important for advancing circular markets and how do we get there, and what's most important for advancing a circular culture and how do we get there. If you'd like, you can scan the QR code and you can give your responses electronically. However, there's not that many of us left. I would love to just hear your voices instead. So if you have any thoughts on, maybe we start with anywhere. Andrea, do you want to use this one?
I don't know if we need it, but I'll use it just in case. Well, I would just like to build on what John, I think it was John Warner, said this morning about, he provided a really good example of how in education they're working beyond benign, I think it was, on developing a curriculum that can be adopted by schools, K through 12, and also higher education on green chemistry. But I'm curious, like Braver Angels or any of these other areas we've been talking about, how to get curricula developed that can be adopted in schools. For example, Braver Angels, if they take on developing a curriculum for schools on how to engage in more constructive dialogue across viewpoints.
Piggybacking off that comment, I'm finishing up academia, and I'm currently leading a startup within fashion waste. It's called Aptly Waste, so if y'all want to follow us, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn. But essentially, we've been leveraging the conversation on fashion and essentially the overall design process. And so one of the things that we've tried to lead in terms of a enterprise or a young enterprise is bridging the conversations with design departments, particularly within Texas. We have a conversation with department heads and professors at Texas Tech. They have a really great fashion education system. And speaking on curriculum, I think it's really important for, I would say, startups, companies to engage with academia, to bridge and really push those actions, like you mentioned. And for me, I feel like that's equally important for young fashion designers to start at the very fundamental level of, if I'm going to make a collection, how do I unite partners? How do I unite manufacturers? How do I source correctly and sustainably? And I think that fuels into curriculum. And I just wanted to share that on that very note. But obviously it's difficult, but we have to start.
Yeah, feel free to add your responses and we'll put them up there as well. Anybody else?
And Dusu will know this already because I've been with the group for about 4 months on the leadership circle calls, and it was nice to come here and see people in person. I haven't talked to Joni yet, but I know you were on the first call, I think, from Aspen, and Holly Alexander. So one of the things I find really valuable, I've been here for 3 days now, is kind of a active or way to present communication connections, emails, phone numbers, areas of interest, innovators. I'm an innovator, a startup company up in Northern California, investors that can bring us closer together faster and more efficiently. The first night on eCapital Summit, we had an open reception, but it was very condensed, just a lot of people powered in. But going through the app that they had and identifying all the investors and communicating out to them, text messaging, getting responses, that gave us a very proactive way to identify and find people that we wanted to talk to and meet with on the topics that are of interest to us for our time here. And we enjoy everything. So I would hope that coming out of these meetings, all the attendees or people that participated, we could have access to their information or areas of expertise or areas of interest that they have, that they want to be part of this. And so that's what I asked for, because it's just something that makes whether you're going into fashion design or any of the other areas, it's just so helpful to have a more efficient way to reach out to the community.
I agree, and one of the things that we want to do as a part of all of our, well, all two of them, our affinity groups, is to have people inventory what they have and what they need, so that we can match those with abundant resources with those who need those resources and help one another. So we will be asking people to identify what you bring and what you need. And our theory is that this will be much more advantageous to us than, let's say, charging a large membership fee to folks, because we want to demonstrate the value of our partnerships, of our interactions. We know that value is created when we bring people together, and those connections create value. So I want to take what you're saying and turn it into a system for us. It's a little different.
That on their app.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure if you consider something like that as well.
Yeah.
Every attendee had to fill out, or was supposed to fill out a
Mhm.
detailed inventory of what we need and what we have to provide.
Beautiful.
It's really helpful to sort out.
We can use that as a model for us.
Yeah, first, I actually want to thank these guys. They've been doing all this behind the scenes, and we haven't really given you guys credit for all the different conference rooms you've been in all week and really making a difference quietly back there. So thanks for all that. You really don't see that much support at many conferences. You're lucky if you got one person in the room helping. So, and then thanks to you guys. This is great lineup today, some amazing speakers, and you guys as well. Bill and I will be together in San Francisco Climate Week on Friday morning talking about can we stop the sea level rise. So that's a little tiny topic, but should be a lot of fun. But the question I've got, Bill, at the start, you kind of had some goals I think you put at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think it'd be important to, with each monthly update, where are we on that, right?
Yes, yeah.
Keep track of that and where, because again, if they say, it's hard to hit a target if you don't have a plan and you're really monitoring that. So that would be one piece of advice I would suggest as we go forward. I'd love to be a part of those monthly meetings as well.
Good.
But again, thanks for, what you guys have done to put this together.
Yeah, and I'm getting ideas from this conversation about some of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that we should add to that. Those were large goals, large category goals, but I think we need to attach them to specific outcomes, specific benefits that come from our work. So we'll come back with some KPIs and share them with the group and see if we're on track and adopt and evolve to those.
I wanted to point out that we have a bit of a star sitting among us. Xiye Bastida. I was wondering if she could introduce herself and share a little bit of her story with us and her thoughts on advancing a circular economy and culture.
And Xiye, can you come up here and sit and share with folks? Do you mind?
Sure.
Yeah. So Xiye Bastida, we are pleased to have you joining us and bringing a perspective that includes that of the indigenous community. Thank you.
I love this.
Yes. And we have the cream of the crop here for you. The room was full of superfluous. No, I shouldn't say that. But now we have the cream of the crop here, to hear what you have to tell us about the wisdom that we can find in those communities that we call indigenous, although we all come from these indigenous communities, but some of us have been separated from them for a couple of centuries, and some of us less so. So give us a little bit of what we can learn.
Well, thank you. And it's great to meet you all, see some of you again. I come from an indigenous community in central Mexico called Tultepec, which means the land of tule. Tule is a long grass, and we weave it to make all sorts of things. And my name means soft rain, Xiye. And one of the ways in which we have gotten tied back to our identity in my generation is to use our indigenous names. And as you might know, it's no surprise, being indigenous in Mexico and in any part of the world just a few generations ago was looked down upon. So my grandfather didn't learn our indigenous language because my great-grandfather didn't teach him to keep him safe. And now we are like fully turning that on its head and saying, actually, indigenous wisdom is probably one of the greatest solutions to the climate crisis, because indigenous ways of life, indigenous ways of being, are about correlation, and by relation I mean like our relationship, right, to the earth, a reciprocal relationship. And the reason why I was so attracted to what you're talking about today, this idea of circularity, is that whenever I have any issues, any problems in my life, I just look to nature. And right now we have an issue of excess of waste. But there is no such thing as waste in nature. And I'm sure you've used that analogy over and over again here. I'm always so, I just feel this sense of relief when I think when a tree grows old, it falls down and it's nourishment for the next tree to grow up. And everything is cycled in a way that it makes sense. And we're creating an issue in the earth of excess extraction and excess waste. And we're not closing the loop. And so just looking at the earth, looking at the way the earth behaves, is one of the things that has given me the most strength in my activism. I've been an activist. Well, my parents met at the Earth Summit in 1992, so I've been an activist before I was born. But I'm just going to share one of these insights that I've had of what it's like to listen to the earth. So one day I was walking on a beach with a lot of people, and I realized every time we stepped on the sand, our footprints would sink. And I kept thinking, that's what we're always told to do. Live your footprint. Leave your mark. But I just couldn't stop thinking the softer I stepped, the faster it would just disappear. And the earth would just kind of go back to being herself, if that makes sense. And we're stuck with this idea of leaving our mark, that we might actually get stuck and not move forward. What that day taught me is we can walk softly on the earth and still make it to where we need to be. That we don't need to have this, frankly, very individualistic idea of, I need to make sure the earth knew I was here. But have you looked up and seen where you were going? That is just one thing of the many things that I've learned throughout my life. And I truly do believe that it is the going back to these ways of seeing the world, what my dad calls, an indigenous communities call the original instructions.
The original instructions?
The original instructions of how to be with the earth. That's this climate solution. Because the climate crisis is just an output of all of the ways in which we have extracted, polluted, othered each other. And to fix that, the climate crisis, we need to go to the very core. And there's one thing my dad always says. He says, we are on earth to take care of life. We are not here to take over. And there's just like all of these little things that I keep repeating and coming back to, because that's what gives me the clarity that I feel like I need a lot of the times when I feel lost, or I feel like I need one of that guidance. And then the last thing I'll share, because I actually want us to have a conversation, I think the last thing I'll share is, one time somebody asked me, when does the future start? And I kept thinking, like, I don't know, like, is the next second or future? Is a year from now the future? 10 years from now? 50 years from now? And in average, people say the future starts in 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. And so this is a psychologist who studies the future. She's in the Institute of the Future, which I didn't know existed. And it's people who dedicate their lives to study scenarios of the future. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes and think of the world 10 years from now. That is, we are in 2036, and it's Earth Day 2036. Where are you waking up? What does the air smell like? What time do you wake up? What type of person are you in 10 years? How does your body feel? Are you ready to go jump in the gym and do something? Are you resting? Are you traveling? When you walk outside, what do you see? What does the air feel like? And so what you're practicing now is vivid, episodic future thinking. And science says that when we think vividly about our futures, we activate 11 parts of our brain. When we think about a memory in the past, we use 6 parts of our brain. So we're activating 5 more parts of our brain when we think vividly about the future. And what's the issue? We have been told our future is the apocalypse over and over again.
Yeah.
All of our media, we have more ways of seeing the end of the world than we can count.
Yeah.
And what our brain does is we behave towards what we see in that imagined future. So one of the most incredible and powerful things each of us can do is practice imagining positive futures. When you walk out of your house, you're using public transportation because now it's accessible everywhere around the world. You have local food that grows and thrives. There's no climate emergency or heat warnings or pollution warnings. In Mexico City, where I live now, almost every other day we have pollution warnings. And I know it's not even close to what people in cities like Delhi have to go through. When I ask them in 10 years, what do you want your future to look like? I promise you, they say, I want to be able to see the sky and the stars. And when we have those envisioned thoughts and those envisioned possibilities, we actually act towards that unconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of people talk about manifestations and things like that. It's the ways our brain is wired. And so when you tell my generation, you have to go to a good school, get good grades, to get into a good college, to get a good job, and we're seeing that all of those things are proving to be false. You are totally destroying our faith in our own imagination. So we need to get together to reinstate that faith and see that imagining is probably one of our greatest strengths. And this is tied back to indigenous thoughts, because in indigenous communities, we think in 7 generations. We have something called the 7-generation principle, where everything that we do is informed by the wisdom, lived experience, and history of the past 7 generations to inform the stability of the future 7 generations. So think about how leaders behave when they're thinking about the kids of the kids of the kids of the kids. It's a different behavior. And so when I was listening to these election cycles and how in the US people are acting, and not just in the US, in many places around the world, it is so short, and not only 1 generation or 2, it's 6 years, it's 4 years, right? It's so short that the instincts that kick in, as our human instincts that kick in, is I need to conserve my power. I'm not thinking, how am I giving back to ensure the stability of 7 generations down the line? 7 generations is approximately 250 years, and it's not as long as we think. If I sit right here and I have my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my daughter, my granddaughter, my great-granddaughter, I am in the middle of connecting those 7 generations. And each of us can be storytellers of that. And I know not all of us have the gift of getting to meet our great-grandmother, right? But in essence, we share the world with people who are in that same generation. And the great-grandmother could meet the great-grandchild. And how beautiful is that? That what we think a big span of time can be united by one person listening to a story and the other one telling the story of creation, for example, of our communities. And when you think in those big times, like it's called deep time thinking as well.
It's called deep
time thinking.
Deep time thinking.
Our brain actually gets a flexibility, and I think our heart does get a flexibility as well. We kind of can breathe deeper and say, so much is possible. And just by thinking beautifully and speaking beautifully, we're already making it happen every single day. I feel very, very, I just need to remind all of you, 80% of the world's biodiversity is protected by indigenous peoples. That's 5% of the global population protecting 80% of the global biodiversity. And it's not just because that's where we live, and it's because over the past 10,000, 5,000 years, the relationship to the earth has been one where we make the earth be as biodiverse as possible. Because we think sometimes our only relationship to the earth can be one of destruction. But when you live in symbiosis with the environment around you, you create actually a lot of biodiversity. And some of the most biodiverse places in the world is where indigenous communities have lived. The Amazon rainforest should not exist. The soil in the Amazon rainforest is one of the most unfertile in the world. It was over the process of 4,000 years that over 1.5 to 2 meters of topsoil was created and after the caring of that land for the Amazon rainforest to exist today. Because of the care that we gave, we are capable of creating abundance. And if we don't really sit with that, I think we're wired and rewired to feel like, why are humans, like, when were we ever in touch with the earth? Is that even possible? Who knows how to grow food here, right? Like, we need to go back to those teachings. And we need to do it using our own unique skills. If a forest was all the same tree, if everyone had the same skills, the soil dries out, the nutrients go away. It is when a forest is biodiverse that the soil is rich. And the deep work is the mycelium growing and uniting all of us. And that's what we're doing right here. I don't know many of you, and you probably have met a lot of people you don't know, but we're in these spaces making the connections possible that, well, I had to be there. That's how I feel now, right? Like, I learned something that made my heart feel different, and that gives me strength to keep going. And that's how 400-year-old trees communicate with the trees coming up. Tell them, this is how you need to grow. That's where the sun is. That's how much water. Trees give water to each other. Did you know that? If one needs one, the other one gives it. So we just need to look down to the earth, see what we can learn, implement it in our lives, and have that courage to imagine a future that is good so that we can start behaving in that manner.
Terrific. Any thoughts? I think that, Joni? No, you, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so blessed to see you again and be here and be part of this group at this point in time, because it's essential to be sharing this essential wisdom to us all. So I just want to thank you and bless you and be so happy that we're all part of this experience now, and it's at the perfect point as you get information from many things, and then you're here from the heart and all of the generations from mankind. And so I just wanted to honor you and say thank you to all of it. I feel blessed to be in the circle of life and all that we're doing here, and just offer whatever I can to help supporting all of this, through either our Earth Law Center that we're working with in 40 countries, and this is our focus, to help protect and Mother Nature and our intergenerational practices and dialogues and all of that. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for everything that you do and for the spirit that you bring into the room. Your creation itself is a reflection of this community that we have created. And I think, as you say, when we go deep into our minds, which is very hard in a digital economy where we're constantly triggered. But when we go deep into ourselves, I think we find a calm that allows us to be confident of the long-term future, of life itself. We are expressions that have telescoped from the beginning that we know of, 10 billion years ago or something. We've telescoped from that to this incredible diversity that we have, but we still are fundamentally one. And we don't know what's on the other side of that, but we seem to be manifesting the possible that lies on the other side, one by one. I have had the blessing of nearly losing my life on a number of occasions in operating rooms and being face to face with that point of transition. And those moments are telling. They've actually made me feel very satisfied with my life. It's kind of shocking to me because I've grown up, fearing death, up to the point where I was about to experience it, and I thought, it's all okay. It's all okay, because we are not individual beings so much as we are expressions of potential that's underlying, and we're gradually discovering what's possible. And I feel like we are on the verge of, as a human species, discovering another set of qualities, another way of being that reflects what indigenous peoples have known for a long time and integrates some of the technology tools that we have. I was in Mongolia a couple of years ago, living on yurts with the local population, and realizing that these folks were living the same way virtually as their ancestors had 10,000 years before, but they also had solar power and cell phones and connectivity, and some of their children stayed right there in the community because they feel a sense of oneness, and some of their children went off to Tokyo and became doctors and lawyers and so on, but they still came together as a family. So there's a new way of life that now is becoming possible. It'll be a long time until we're actually living it fully, and then it'll continue to evolve, but it will reflect some of that wisdom of communities that don't think in terms of a quarter, quarterly returns or single lifetimes, but that think in those longer cycles of which we are a part. So I want to thank you for what you have brought. I know you do this all the time. You inspire whole rooms of people, so I want to appreciate that. And I want to thank all of you for being a part of our discussion today. And I look forward to continuing this relationship with all of you and more, all the folks that were in this room, and many, many more beyond that. We're going to change things that are going to blow our minds, I think, over time. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of the launching of Circle America. And I don't think we need good luck. We need goodwill, and we need to connect with each other. And we will unleash what is possible that we can't quite see. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill.